What's going on? This is Zach Adelstein with DFS Army, and I'm here with Aaron Friedman. Today we're going to be going over the Week 12 college football slate. Main slate on Draftkings, and we'll go over some of the main slate on FanDuel as well. Another interesting week. We have 2 weeks left for college football before the championship week. And yeah, it's going to be a fun one. Some really important games here. I think some weird stuff's going to happen in the next week. We have that Black Friday slate and the big slate to end off the year. How's your week going, Aaron? I know you went to the game last week, that Purdue Illinois game. How'd that go?
It was fun. I feel like the referees really messed with the flow of the game, but it was cool to see the teams in person, and some of the defenders Illinois has were pretty impressive. This cornerback Witherspoon. So I wasn't too familiar with individual defenders on Illinois, so it was cool just to see some guys in person.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure. And at least you're not at the cold games this week that look like they'll be a bit colder.
Yeah.
But yeah, all right, let's get going on this slate. Jumping right in. This first matchup is TCU at Baylor. TCU is favored by 2.5 here with a 58-point total. TCU was in that stinker last week, but came out ahead. And now this will be an interesting game going down to Waco. Max Duggan here. He's really strong. He hurt his calf a couple weeks ago. Really not getting on yards that he was getting before that. You can really see the off here against Kansas State, and really got pummeled last week against that Texas front seven. Not there for me. Baylor has a decent front seven as well. I do, I think there's some upside, but just not a great price with everything else that is on this. With some of the other quarterbacks on this slate at these prices. Going to running back, I do like Kendre Miller here. His price is getting up there, but he's still getting a ton of volume. He has 5 straight, I believe, with over 100 yards. Has a touchdown in every game this year. And he's really getting involved a little bit in the passing game as well, getting some targets. And then over at wide receiver, not a ton I like on either team. Quentin Johnson, every week has kind of gone down. His targets have gone down every week, and the production's not there. I think he's still banged up. He's got a nice floor, but at this point, you really want to get a ceiling game out of him, and I don't know if this is the spot. So, and you go over, if you want to look at the Baylor running backs, Richard Reach hasn't done a lot in the last 2 weeks. Last week they got down early, so it was kind of tough to do much against OU. He had so much production the couple where I do think he might be a GPP play here if you really want to go there. Just because they will look to him from time to time. But it's just not. There's other places I'd rather go here personally. So not a lot I really love here. What are you looking at here, Aaron?
Yeah, not a lot. I do like Holmes at receiver. I was eyeing some of his. Holmes. Yeah, he's been really up and down, but he's interesting if they get into a track meet here. But I don't know. Shapen's like blah kind of. Yeah, definitely not. I think a better real life game than a fantasy one.
Let's see. The one guy to look at for kind of a pump play for Baylor, they've been pretty consistent past couple weeks. As Josh Cameron has 5-6 receptions, 80 yards, getting a little bit more action the last couple weeks. And one of those cheap plays, if you want to go there, I don't mind it if he's going to be under 4K and going to get you 12 to 14 points. But yeah, just kind of, I think it'll be a fun game to watch. I don't know if it's going to be the best DFS game. Moving over to Indiana at Michigan State. Some interesting things here. Michigan State's favored by 10 with a 47.5 point total, which seems really weird for both these teams. They both have decent offenses, but they also not great defenses, but they just both turn the ball over so much. But looking at both of these, it could be interesting. So Dexter Williams came in last week for Bazelak and looked decent on the ground. He was not great efficiency-wise. Touchdowns out of his 6 completions on 19 attempts. And there's some talk that he's going to get the start this week. I want to watch that, confirm it in pregame, but I don't mind him at 5,500. He doesn't need to do a ton, and he does dual threat ability. Over at running back, Berger gets some volume, and Indiana can really stink it up against the run. I hate him there at 5,700. Then going over to wide receivers, Jaden Reed has 19 targets over the last 2 weeks. With it, only has 9 catches on that, but he does have a touchdown in each of those games and getting some bigger plays. And this Indiana defense just isn't that great. Coleman, I'd rather Reed for $100 more, but Coleman and there does have some upside. But yeah, Williams is kind of a cheap super flex kind of play. And then Berger and Reed are my plays that I'm looking at here for this game. What about you?
Yeah, I like Berger a good amount. And Thorne. I mean, this is with Michigan State, there hasn't been a ton of opportunities to play them because they're usually playing one of the better teams in the East. So I think this is a good spot for Thorne if you're going cheap at the position. 21 last time. He usually doesn't like the Michigan and Illinois ones. They really had a bad crossover schedule too. So I think that's killed them from getting into good flow. So I like Thorne here. And then Berger also in Reed. And then on the Indiana side, a punt I've looked at is go to the receivers. AJ Barner, he's their tight end. He has I'm blanking out on the guy who I played a touchdown score prop. Yeah, he scored versus this guy. He scored in back-to-back weeks. So for 38, he's not the worst option.
Yeah, I don't mind him for a punt. There's some punts down there I like this week. And he's there, getting some targets, and this is the worst matchup at all for him. Moving over to Illinois and Michigan. This is an interesting game. I think Illinois is going to stay there. The 41-point total with Michigan favored by 17.5. I think this could be an under game for sure. Both of these defenses are top 5 in the country. Very good defenses. Kind of 2 plays here you really want to look at. Chase Brown's banged up, so we need to watch and see if he's going to go here. I would assume that he would go. And McCray's banged up behind him. Honestly, if Brown doesn't go, I don't want to touch any of these running backs. It's just you need a top-end running back against. And then Blake Corum. Blake Corum's interesting. He's got a lot of the books have him at like 120, 130 point, or 120, 130 yard rush prop. But this is a top rushing defense in Illinois. They have struggled the past couple weeks, but even then they've been up like 105 yards. So it is something that he's in play for GPPs. I don't love him for cash just because of the defense. Same thing with Brown. And Brown's banged up, but I do think they're both in play. Other than that, there's not a ton I love here. I don't want to, Williams get some volume, get some touchdown and red zone target against Michigan with this total. It's just not worth it. And I don't like either of these quarterbacks. Anything else you like here, Aaron?
Yeah. If we get word that Brown and McCray aren't going, which honestly seems unlikely, but it's not a zero possibility. Yeah, Reggie Love. He gets carries in every game. There's a shot he could start, but that's definitely something. We should find this out beforehand because there's enough beat writers between the two schools. So just a name to know as a depth piece.
Yeah, for sure. He's a pump player. It's a name to keep in mind for sure. Going over to Wisconsin, Nebraska. 39.5 point total here, and Wisconsin is favored by 10.5. A few things to look at here. Casey Thompson is back. Honestly, I'm not going to play Casey Thompson, but what that does for me is that does put me back onto Trey Palmer, who's really struggled with the backups in. And so that is something I really want to keep an eye on. And I kind of like him at this price. The other play that, at this price, at $7K with his volume against one of the worst rushing teams in the country, I'm just going to lock him in and kind of load up on him. He had a rough week last week, but Iowa was one of the best rushing defenses in the country. Nebraska is literally the complete opposite. I believe they're like bottom 5 in rushing efficiency on defense. They're in the bottom 10% of a lot of the categories and just not a good rushing defense. Then my favorite top end running back here out of all the matchups. What are you looking at, Aaron?
Yeah, Allen for sure is he's the play of the game, definitely. I agree with you on Palmer, and then on the Wisconsin side, I don't know. I wish DK was cheaper, but I don't know. Everyone's on Wisconsin except for Allen feels priced up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't understand their pricing here.
But
yeah, DK, he's got upside, and he's kind of gone with, if Merch can get going, he gets going. Yeah, that's kind of, Allen is. There's a lot of these games this week where there's not a ton of plays, and this is another one of them. Next game is not a game like that for me. There are a lot of plays here, I think. Wazoo at Arizona. Going over here, I think both quarterbacks are in play. Delora more than more. Delora's priced up here, and he did not throw it as much last week, or the past 2 weeks, in fact. 20 and 28 after that was a few 30s in there. I do think he's going to have to air it out here a bit more because Wazoo has a decent run defense, and they're not as good through the air, not as good of a secondary. And I love this spot for more of a GPP play for me just because this is Arizona. And but I do like this spot for him. I don't love his price. I wish he was a little bit cheaper because he does have a floor. But Arizona, as good as they are with the pass, they're that bad against the pass. So I do think this is more of a ceiling game for him. But his ceiling game's problem is he doesn't get to 30 points. And I wanted at least 30 points at the south. So it kind of takes me off of him a little bit, but I do think he's in play. Going over to running back, they have, with that reduction, gotten Michael Wiley really involved, especially last week. Gave him 21 carries. He's really getting involved in the pass game as well, so that kind of gives you a nice floor to work with, even if he's not. The week before that, he only had 6 carries, but he had those two. He had those 2 receptions, which really got to a decent price. I mean, it wasn't great, but that's still something to. He's someone I really love, close to a cash play even in this spot. And then at wide receiver, the 3 guys are always. I'll go back to one of my favorite plays in a second. The 3 guys for their passing game are always in play: Cowing, Singer, and McMillan. In that order is kind of how their receivers go. Cowing's getting less and less targets every week, but his less targets are still 8 to 9 a game, and he has big upside. Singer and McMillan kind of are off and on, decent plays. You kind of look at their game logs, and they've had some big games in there, some duds in there. So they're definitely GPP plays, but they're big upside GPP plays. Probably my favorite play on the slate as a value play. I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know what they're doing, but Nakia Watson is the number 1 running back for Washington State. He has back-to-back 100-yard games, touchdowns over those games. Has 3 receptions for 71 yards in the last 2 games, and he's under 4K. He's kind of a free square here. Arizona is awful against the run, awful against running backs. I'm just going to plug him in most of my lineups. Might lock him in my 20 maxes. I'm not sure yet, but just lock him in. I think he's a good play up to like 6K. So under 4,000, he's play here. And then if you go over to Wazoo, a few places that I want to look If Farrell's out, I know he's listed as out. That still is from last week, so he is questionable. So if he's out, Stribling gets a nice bump. But there's a nice value play down here that for some reason, if I can spell it, that for some reason is min price missing. He has, I believe, like 4 to 7 targets in every game the past 4 games. He has double-digit Draftkings in 3 of those 4 games. If he's going to get you an 11 or 12 at min price, that's not the worst thing you can do to then pay up elsewhere and to really get into the thick of things elsewhere. So he's a guy that he's a pump play for me on this slate. But yeah, just a lot of plays all over, I think, in this game, and even more places if you really want to look at them. What else are you looking at here, Aaron?
Yeah, definitely a great fantasy game. I think you can make the quarterbacks work with some of the value we have, just like most slates here. Watson is a smash play. I'm looking for some props. I see him at 85 yards rushing, which is pretty awesome. So, yeah, 85 on both sites, and Wiley for sure. And then receivers, I think you mix and match with Cowing as a 87-yard receiving prop, and him and Singer are basically even money to score. So they're both pretty strong plays. Yeah, you'll basically, if you're invested in this game, you'll kind of want to mix and match here. And then I also agree with you on the Smithson call. That's a great guy to add into your pool.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good game for value and also top end plays. It's a decent game stack. You want to go there for GPPs for some lineups.
Yeah.
Going over to Kansas State, West Virginia. Kansas State favored by 7.5 here with a 54.5 point total. Always a weird game when teams travel to West Virginia. This is no different. A few places to look at here. First of all, Martinez is out, so Will Howard's getting the start. I think he's looked great this year. Has at least 20 Draftkings in every game he's played in, including not a full game against Baylor last week. Decent price here, so he's a guy I'm really looking at against a bad defense. JT Daniels got pulled last week for Garrett Green, and I wish he was cheaper because I do think he has upside here, as you saw last week with his huge rushing ability. And I still think he is a GPP play if he starts. We need to watch and see what happens. He came in at State, I think, after an injury to JT Daniels, and then Daniels just wasn't good last week, and Green came in, and so if Green gets a start, I do think he's a decent GPP play here. I just wish he was priced in the 5s, not the 6s. Going to running back, one of my favorite plays on this one. With Martinez out, he has more touchdown upside because he's not going to get vultured for those rushing touchdowns. He's getting used a lot more in the passing game. He has 15 receptions in the last 2 games, which is what he was really lacking early in the season for some reason. They couldn't figure out he's the best receiving running back in the country, basically. Running the ball just all over. He's 1,100 less than Corum, who's going up against a great defense. He's going up against an awful defense. Mathis got a ton of volume last week, didn't do much with it. Johnson's back now. They're going to get volume. I don't know how much what that's going to mean if Green goes and he's going to take those rushing touchdowns. That's really going to cap their upsides. And then over wide receiver, Ford Wheaton and Prather are still neck and neck with targets and their salary discrepancy. They didn't do a ton last year. In play his price. Has nice. 7 touchdowns. every week. If they're going to start going to their tight end more, this is to do it. Struggle against tight ends throughout the year. 300%, just another. Will be. Or I'm.
Yeah, I agree. The quarterbacks are interesting darts here, and the running backs are a little interesting. I'm a little out on. Mathis is hard to. I don't like him against this defense, but he got hurt with Green, taking Green's mobility. So I think probably just Deuce and then the quarterbacks in GPPs.
With a 7.5 point total. I get value of stacking. Best quarterback around. Huge game that wasn't on. We haven't seen him since the Friday night. So we've seen this, and he's gone off then. So he's not in the. But I think he is great, and he's not priced. This Stroud be all over him, and he'd be at 10K. So like passing, they're absolutely atrocious against the pass. The worst, especially against quarterbacks, get the Alex touchdown upside. Should be a very close game. It's a good team, but their pass defense is he other better, especially for us, but his floor, he's a decent GPP play. Sounds 100 yards. It's right either. So here, base sell. That game, which was that we really did one Slates, so we haven't seen a ton of it. Hop in, play, and play most expensive play, but I never play. For me, this four play for we have be the team as a whole. This is a ceiling game for this passing game. This is a game some up in outside
I like, yeah, I love Toon. He's another guy. You can game stack this game, and there's so many good cheap receivers that you can get expensive players in. Toon and Ahlers, I like both of them here. It's kind of like Toon and Mordecai a few weeks ago, where you get two really experienced quarterbacks. So, at about 7K average for the two guys, I love that, and I like Mitchell a lot too. I think my favorite stack is probably Ahlers and Mitchell, just so you don't have to play roulette with the ECU receivers. And then I definitely want a lot of Dell on the Houston side, and I agree with you on Brown. He's a great value play.
Hey, just weeks because I'm on Slate on Kings. I'm not a game 21. Like to time. The reason I don't really play him is Boston College has it's an 11 TT total. Six. Even if it's over there, they get 14 or even kind of hard out that side. Very good. I'll play. Go back. It's Audrey May. Gotten the price guy that I think is in the last game. Don't put it back-to-back games. Threw it 18 times total. It was hard to air nothing. So more throwing it, maybe going Roderick. And if you always kind of just don't price something. What are you looking at here, Aaron?
Yeah, I love Moorhead here. I feel like all of the models are projecting low on Moorhead and some of the BC guys. Moorhead's really cheap on FanDuel too. He's only like 7,200 there.
Nice.
So yeah, he's definitely gonna be a strong play for me on both sites. Running back, I'm probably not touching just because of the other options we've talked about and some of the ones in the next games. I like, and then receiver, I definitely like Flowers, and then another guy is Joseph Griffin Jr. He has back-to-back touchdowns, and this is a true freshman receiver. I actually tweeted about him today because he had a ridiculous anytime touchdown prop. It was like plus 600, and I think it's probably still plus 400. So I think you can just double stack both of these guys just because Griffin's so cheap. So I like him a lot here on both sites even.
Over to practice. I think this is when they want to get back. Like he's. I do think he's really cool. Last couple of weeks, not as much like before that. And then also they struggle just pull it down. Thing that he will do a lot of is for me. Really rough week last week, and it's hard at this place, but he has that 30 season, which really help you out. Actually, I don't hate him. This is fun. So this isn't a TU. And even last week, Texas just was not really good. But I don't think back it really is going to move a lot with his legs. And then going over to wide receiver, a few plays for me is Worthy is getting the targets. It's just him, and yours has been bad. Yours has been very bad the past 3 or 4 games. So if he and Worthy can get on the same page, I really like Worthy. I love the upside. Whittington had 11 targets last week. Not my favorite play. Didn't do a ton with him, but he does have upside. Old 5-star recruit. And then Jatavian Sanders, it's too cheap. Always too cheap. If you get a floor of 10 to 13, most weeks, especially the second half of the year, he's really getting on the same page with a nice ceiling at 4,500. I really like that. So Sanders is probably my favorite play here. Worthy is a top play as well. Daniels is a decent play, and then Bijan, I think, is always in play. What about you? What are you looking at here,
Aaron? Yeah, not so much the quarterbacks for me. At running back, I am looking at Neal a bunch on both sites. He has an average of 200 rushing yards the past couple of games. I'm not expecting that again versus Texas, but the volume's there. They're giving him a ton of carries. So I like him as a mid-range play on both sites. Then at receiver, there's a few guys for Kansas. Sanders for sure always is a great value on both sites. And then Fairchild, I think I'll go back to again. He is just another guy to get into your cheap receiver pool. So I like him here as just another cheap option.
Yep, I don't mind that at all. All right, moving over to Miami, going to Clemson. Total here is 48 with a Clemson's favored by 19.5. Not a ton I like here. DJU, if you want to go there, he did rebound a little bit last game, but with the lower total, I don't love this. They do have a 34-point ITT here, which isn't awful. Probably my favorite play in this game is Will Shipley. Shipley's getting some volume. Miami does have a good run defense, but Shipley has a decent floor. Not too expensive here. Mid-price running back. Another play, depending on what happens, if Bo Collins is out, I do not hate Antonio Williams here. He had 11 targets last week. It's the most for any Clemson receiver all year. And it looks like DJU is just locking onto him. And that's something you can do here against Miami. They have a decent secondary, but not the best secondary. So he's a guy I might keep an eye on if Collins is out, just as a mid-price guy, especially on that afternoon slate where there's not a ton of top wide receivers. But that's about it for me. Shipley and Williams are the 2 places I really want to go. If you want to play against this Clemson run defense, with Parrish out, Knighton should get a decent volume, but I don't play against this Clemson run defense. They're just very good. Aaron, anything you've seen here, Aaron?
Yeah, mainly just Knighton, not a whole bunch. I like.
Yeah, it'll be a fun game, just not a great DFS game. Moving over to NC State at Louisville. Total here is 44.5, with Louisville being favored by 4. Cunningham still questionable. Probably will come down to a game time decision. So something we need to watch. if he's in, I think he's in play every week just with his rushing upside. Not my favorite play because this is a decent defense for NC State and the total's not very high. He's in play. MJ Morris, another great value quarterback here. He uses his legs, so has that rushing touchdown upside. He can air it out. Has kind of struggled a little bit against Boston College, but against Virginia Tech and Wake Forest, he had 23 and 24 DraftKings points. Had 3 touchdowns in each of those games. So just someone to keep an eye on that I do think is in play. Go over to running backs. If Cunningham is out, I think Evans is in play. He'll get more rushing upside, have more touchdown upside. I do think that changes a little bit with if Cunningham is in. And then over at receiver, Hudson's been great lately. Getting a ton of volume, even with Cunningham out. Had his best game of the year last week. Has 300 yards over the last 2 weeks. So definitely someone I'm keeping an eye on is Hudson, regardless of Cunningham. And then Thayer Thomas has some upside. I don't love his pride or their pay up other places, but he has those upside games. He goes off. So he's a guy that is very much boom or bust, but has some upside. But yeah, just kind of a decent amount of plays for a lower total game. What are you looking at here, Aaron?
Yeah, I like Morris. He's young, so there's going to be some up and down here. So I like having 5-10% in your 20 max. At running back, I agree on Evans. It's going to be hard just with the late start time, but he's interesting. And then at receiver, yeah, Hudson and Thomas for me.
Yeah. So going over to Ohio State at Maryland. Ohio State's favored here by 27.5 points with the 63.5 point total. CJ Stroud, again, very expensive, but he's in play. He's more of a GPP play for me at his price. He just doesn't get those 30-point games as much as he needs to lately to get either. He only has none in the last 4 games. And you need those. You really need a 40-point game at this price to really go off with some of the other value. But he is, I do think, in play for GPPs. Going over to running back, when no one was, early in the week, it looked like Williams and Henderson might be out as they were last week. But now that all 3 look like they're healthy, I am kind of leaning off of them. If you want to go to one, Henderson would be the guy to go to at this price. But I think it's hard to go to any of them in this situation. Then going over to wide receiver, to me it looks like Harrison's really pulled away and made himself the clear number 1 receiver in this offense. Just getting the targets there. Ibuka's young. I believe he's a true freshman, and just hasn't had a season this long before. So it is, I know Harrison's younger as well, but he just kind of faded as of late. He does have the upside, but pay up 400 and go to Harrison. Is my way of looking at it. And then with Smith and Jigba being hurt and doubtful still, Fleming is in play. He's kind of struggled the last couple of weeks. And then Kate Stover, the tight end, is getting some looks around the end zone. So those are kind of my plays here. I would say Harrison's a clear favorite. The other 3 are GPP plays. And then that is more of a GPP play. So, big game. It's kind of weird not going all in on Ohio State receivers and passing game every week, but it's just kind of where it's at here. What are you looking at, Aaron?
Yeah, I definitely like Stroud at lower ownership. And when I talk about FanDuel, he's even more interesting there. Because some of the night slate quarterbacks, but I still think you need some Stroud. And mainly Stroud and Harrison for me, and then I'm still looking at the tight end, Stover, for the Buckeyes. I know he's like sub 6K on FanDuel. I forgot what he is on. Let me pull him up on DraftKings.
Was that Stover?
Yeah, Stover.
He's at 4,900.
Oh, Uh, no, he's a lot cheaper on FanDuel. So
Yeah, he's had. I mean, he had a decent game
yeah,
last week. He's got that upside. But I think he's in play for GPPs. He's not as strong as on FanDuel, but he's in play.
yeah.
All right, moving over to Penn State at Rutgers. Let's see. Total here is 44.5, with Penn State being 20-point favorites. Clifford doesn't throw it in blowouts a ton, so kind of off of him and the receivers here. My two real plays are Singleton and Allen, both getting very similar volume still. Singleton had the bigger game last week, had some big plays in there, 2 touchdowns. So really went off, and he got the little price bump. Whereas Allen actually had 5 more carries last week and just didn't do as much with them. I think you can go to either of them. I do think there's a case to be made here for playing both of them in the same lineup for GPPs, just to differentiate yourself. Now, I'm not saying make a single entry lineup with both of them, but if you're playing 150 lineups, if you want to do it in a couple lineups, I don't hate the idea at all, because I do think there's times both of them could get 20 plus points. Yeah, that's kind of my only play here is those two. What are you looking at here, Aaron?
Yeah, mostly just the running backs and receivers. I think Singleton and Allen are worth sprinkling in. And then a receiver, I'm willing to go back to Tinsley in a lighter matchup. And then on the other side, I do like Sean Ryan. He had a good game last week, and he's cheap.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
He's not a bad for a mid-price guy at all. All right, and then going over to the last game of the day, we have Georgia going to Kentucky. It's a weird game for me. I think it's the great football game, not a great DFS game. Bennett's priced up again. I don't know why they do that. He had a decent game last week, but didn't like go off or anything. But he's priced up too high. I'm not playing any Kentucky players against this Georgia defense. No, Rodriguez, I like his upside, just not here. Dejon Edwards hasn't gotten the end zone in a few weeks, and that's kind of the only reason we're playing him. So it's kind of hard to play him without that. And then, McIntosh and Milton just eat each other too much. If you have to get a spot here, Bowers and McConkey are the way to go. I don't suggest it. Bowers is just so variable. He needs touchdowns really to get you going because they're just not throwing to him a ton. The ball out this year, which is great for them. They didn't have that last year. That's why he really would go off. But they have more pieces to really hit, and they're really going to their running backs a ton as well. So yeah, I'm kind of off of this game for DFS purposes. But if you have to, McConkey and Bowers. Anything you see here, Aaron?
I'm kind of in full agreement. I don't really like this game.
No, nothing here. Tell me a little bit about the night slate over on FanDuel. What do you like over there?
So the game of the week for fantasy on both sites is probably USC UCLA. So that game is going to dictate a lot of the FanDuel slate, and you may want to have, like, if you're doing a 3-max or something, have like a Stroud lineup and then have a Williams DTR lineup. I think Williams and DTR are going to be pretty popular on FanDuel. And then Hendon Hooker's also in Tennessee are also on the night slate. So yeah, I'm probably going to go pretty pricey at quarterback. Williams, Stroud, DTR, and Hooker are the top 4 most expensive quarterbacks on FanDuel. And then if you go, I referenced this a little bit before, but Moorhead 7,200. So I'm going to have a lot of him in like my 3-max and in GPPs just because that price is so nice. Running back, Charbonnet is the most expensive guy, but I'm fine stacking DTR and Charbonnet just because USC's defense is bad and the totals through the roof. Braylon Allen's on there. I like him a lot. Neal's a good. I referenced Neal earlier. He's like 6,400 on DraftKings and 8K on FanDuel, which is very fair. And then another FanDuel only game, which is not a night game. FanDuel included Oregon State, Arizona State, and Oregon State as a good running back. Forgot his first name. Damian Martinez. He's a good back, so I'll have a good amount of him. And then at receiver, I'm probably not going to any of the USC guys just because it's just crowded with Addison back, with Mario back. They've all been held out for this game, so the receivers are going to be – I mean, I'll have some – I think you need some Addison on both sites no matter what, just because he's so good and this game's huge. But it's hard to get there in cash on the expensive USC receivers. And that's mostly it. They did a good job picking games. I wish the FanDuel didn't include Oregon, Utah, which I think makes sense just because that game's starting at 10:30 Eastern. But yeah, that's like the one good game that's left out. Is it even on the DraftKings night slate, or is it on the
No, it's on the late slate, the very late slate.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do think, like this week, I think the midday, afternoon slates, the two slates that are on the DraftKings main are decent. But that night slate and that especially late slate, it's worth staying up for. Like both of those Pac-12 games are two of the best Pac-12 games of the year by far. And I do think both of them are going to be very fun games. But yeah, if you haven't joined us yet, head on over. Join us for the end of the college football season. Get over for the second half of the NFL season. NBA is in full swing now, making money every day, doing very well. World Cup starting. We're gonna have World Cup sheets every day, plays on it. The biggest spectacle in sports. So yeah, we have everything you can imagine over there. If there's fantasy contests, we have someone covering it. So yeah, be sure to head on over to DFS Army today. Get a discount. You'll find it in the link below. And good luck this week. We hope to see you here next week.